All right, welcome everyone. Holding by the book of Leviticus, chapter 17. Again, 101. We're holding by the book of Leviticus, chapter 17. We are in verse 12. We pretty much finished up verse 11 last week after a number of weeks. Speaking about eating blood, we're still going to continue about eating blood, but a little different aspect here. Says verse 12, okay, Amarti livnei Yisrael, kol nefesh mikem lo tochal dam, Bager, agar, besorchem, lo, yochel, dam. So here, again, the Torah says, I said unto the children of Israel, no soul of you shall eat blood, right? Not allowed to eat blood, neither shall any stranger, seeming like a ger tosha, someone who lives in Israel amongst the Jewish people, keeps no hide laws, right? We spoke about that, why the halacha may not be like that, but in general, any stranger that sojourns among you, right, to eat blood. So should be forbidden for the Jewish people and any stranger that lives, any ger toshav, seemingly, that lives amongst the Jewish people. Says Rashi on that. Now, first you got to ask the question, right? First you got to ask the question over here, and that is, okay, we just said before in verse 10, whatever man there be of the house of Israel or any stranger that eats any blood, I'm going to set my face against that soul that eats blood and cut him off from among his people, right? Gets spiritually cut off, kares, as we understand, which can mean either you die young, God forbid, or your children die young, or both, right? Or seemingly both. So we already have a verse. We already have a verse speaks about this. Torah never repeats itself for no reason, right? So here the question is, okay, very good. So what's doing it? Right? What do I need this verse for? To tell me that no Jew should eat it and seemingly no ger toshav, right? No ger toshav should eat it. But if you already tell me that in verse 10, I'm going to say it again in verse 14, I think. Yeah, the blood's in the soul. That you shouldn't eat blood again. So we have a number of places. We have a number of places in general that the Torah says don't eat blood. Now, obviously, there has to be a reason the Torah repeats it. The Torah never repeats anything for no reason. Right? Remember, the Torah says you're not allowed to cook a calf in its mother's milk, mentioned 3 times. So the Karaites who don't believe in oral law also have to come up with some sort of explanation. Right? So we understand it says 3 times, don't cook a calf in its mother's milk. You're not allowed to eat milk and meat together. You're not allowed to cook it even if you don't eat it, and you're not allowed to get benefit from it. Right? So even according to their quote unquote rabbis, gurus, whatever you want to call them, they also have to come up with some sort of explanation. Right? Why that's the case. Why that would be the case that you mention it 3 times. Right? So anytime the Torah, goes into great detail. All right, we spent months going through in Parshas Tazria, speaking in Mitzvah, speaking about leprosy or so-called leprosy, whatever this spiritual disease is for speaking Lashon Hara, but went into a lot of details, tremendous amount of details, even though it doesn't necessarily apply to it, right? Speaking Lashon Hara, obviously forbidden, but we don't see the manifestation of what happened before, right? We don't see the person gets spots and has to be, put outside the camp, and the Kohen has to come a week later, see if the spots grew or they didn't grow or whatever the case is. So anytime you have repetition, even the book of Exodus, right? Even the book of Exodus, you have tremendous amount of repetition when it comes to building the Mishkan, right? Building the tabernacle, the loops, the planks, the boards, the clasps, all these things, right? Great detail, right? I've heard people say, especially non-Jews, right? Deal with a lot of non-Jews there, right? All these things, come on, they don't apply to me. right? Even before we get to Rashi, we'll throw this up. Doesn't apply to me. Okay, so learn parts of the Torah that do apply. But there's nothing that never applies, doesn't have a message. May not be applicable. There are a number of things in the Torah that, we don't have a temple today. Right? So you can't bring sacrifice. If you live in Israel, you can take Truma Maisa. That you can do. Or if you live outside of Israel, you eat Jaffa oranges. Right? They come from Israel, you should take Truma Maisa. You should tithe them. Because they don't tithe them before they leave. At least, as far as I know. Years ago, that was the case. So that's a big stumbling block. I know people say, I want to support Israel, so I'll eat Jaffa oranges. But Jaffa oranges grow in Israel. If they grow in Israel, it's Truma Maisa. Right? You got to take tithes from it. They don't normally take tithes from it before they send it outside of Israel. This is a big problem. This is a very big problem. If anyone's going to eat Jaffa oranges outside of Israel, if you're a Jew, you got to tithe them. Right? Not so complicated to do. Right? But that's something you got to do. Right? So even though there may be a lot of things, I'll give one example. I'll give one example. Right? I give a lot of examples. I'll give one. Right? It says in the book of Leviticus, when a person gave a sacrifice, it was a reach nichoach l'Hashem. It was a nice, pleasant odor to God. Right? What's the obvious question? God doesn't have a nose. Yeah? God doesn't have this big nose going, oh, what a smell. God doesn't have a nose. He's not physical. Right? If he's not physical, what does this mean? What can I gain from it? So even before I get to that, I'll ask another question. Good rabbinic idea. You ask one question to answer another question. Sacrifices. We don't give sacrifices today. Right? We don't have private altars in our backyards or wherever. Can't give sacrifices. Right? Even Israel, you can't do that if you wanted to. You wouldn't make it, security wouldn't allow you on the Temple Mount. And we spoke about Temple Mount yesterday, right? Or last night for me, day for everyone else. Going on the Temple Mount is forbidden for Jews, right? There's no way. We live in a state of impurity. Going up the Temple Mount, even if you knew where to step, there are other problems. So the vast majority of rabbinic authorities hold you're not allowed to go up there. But again, even if you got around those problems, that's going to cause big problems with the Arabs. Since it's going to cause big problems with the Arabs, you can't do it, right? You can't go up there, you can't pray there, right, etc. So people say, come on, a lot of the book of Leviticus has to do with sacrifice. Now, non-Jews will say that doesn't apply to me. So I can say also it doesn't apply to me. I can very easily say it doesn't apply to me. But it does. Why? Because when the temple's rebuilt, it'll be sacrificed. Got to know what to do. Right? You have to learn these laws anyway, at least for a Jew. But you say today, okay, how many people really know them so well? There are people that do. And laws of purity and impurity, again, non-Jews say it doesn't apply to me. So don't learn it. Who says you have to learn it? Doesn't mean there's no message there. Right? That's the mistake. Even if it doesn't apply, and someone's going to say it doesn't apply to me, why should I learn it? Because there's a message there. There's a message. Might not apply. Okay. So what if it doesn't apply? And if you don't get the message, don't learn it. Yeah, but what do sacrifices do? What was the purpose of sacrifice? What's the root of the word sacrifice? What's the word? It's korban. Kufresh beis nun. What's the root of that word? Kufresh beis. Give a little bit of grammar here. Hebrew grammar. What does the word kufresh beis mean? The word kufresh beis means to draw close. That's what it means. It comes on the Vilna Gaon of Elijah Vilna more than 250 years ago and said, before he died, one of the things he wanted to see before he died was someone who brought a sacrifice, what they look like before and after. Why? Why would he do that? Why would he want to do that? Because he said, how is it possible the person doesn't change? He sees that animal, and we're not going to get into animal rights and all that, but he sees that animal is going to be sacrificed. He sinned. He's going to bring this animal to sacrifice. Very good. So that animal should have been him. God gave us the ability to use animals for what we want, as long as we don't abuse them. This is an abuse because God made a direct command. The direct command says, bring the sacrifice for this, for that, for the other thing. Bring this animal, this bird, whatever it is. But so the word kufresh beis means draw close. Okay, so now imagine, first of all, cost you money for these animals. Second of all, it took you time to get there. You don't just hop in a car and a bus, get there, right? It took you days. It'll take you 2 weeks to get there, depending where you are, right? In Israel. Very good. So now imagine, I think everyone can do this. Imagine you take this animal, or you buy the animal there, whatever the case is. You bring that animal and you see the whole process. You realize, first of all, it's cost you time, it's cost you money. Second of all, you realize, let's say sin offering, make it easy. Yeah, you bring a sin offering for something you did wrong. So it's costing you time, it's costing you money. But not only that, that animal that's being sacrificed is instead of you. It comes on the Vilna Gaon, and the Vilna Gaon says, how can it be that a person who gave a sacrifice, if they saw this animal killed in front of them, and everything happens to the animal, we won't get gross here, right? And everything that happens to the animal, how could you be the same? How could you think about sinning again? Because really, you should be dead, right? Essentially, you should die. So when I was in South America back in the day, I went to help out in the ritual slaughter of cows. I won't go into the gory details, right? It didn't make me vegetarian, thank God for that. But I will tell you, I wanted to reenact this for myself, to imagine what this might have been like. So I watched one animal be killed from beginning to end, right? Saw it killed, saw it hung up, saw skin taken off, so you cut up, yeah, and everything else that happens to it had to be, the parts had to be washed out, had to be salted, tremendous amount of salt, right? And you see these big slabs of meat in these huge containers full of salt. What's the purpose of salt? Draw out the blood, can't eat blood, right? As we said. Now, watching that doesn't take that long, the process. Yeah, the animal's killed, right? The skin is taken off. Obviously, the head comes off, skin is taken off, right? Then they cut up the animal. It's not a unbelievably long process, right? But these things have to be done, right? You got to cut up the animal, you got to salt the animal, you got to check the lungs, right? You got to check the lungs, make sure no perforations, got to make sure, no other issues with any other organs, make it into a treifa, and all that. When a person sees it in front of their face, now here you can imagine, right? We'll use our imagination, but imagine if you saw that in front of your face and you realize, again, this is taking time, this is taking money, yeah, but you realize this animal's being sacrificed for you. You should have been up there being flayed, having your skin taken off, cut up and all that. Imagine that should have been you. Comes on the Vilna Gaon, and the Vilna Gaon says, how can a person be the same? If a person witnessed that and they put all their strength into it, imagining that's who it was, i.e. themselves, how is that possible? The Vilna Gaon says for that person to be the same afterwards. Remember, it's costing them time and money. They don't want to keep coming, every couple of days. They have to schlep out to the, to go to the temple and bring sacrifice and, and all that. They'll think twice, 3 times before what they did. But shouldn't they have now tremendous amount of fear of heaven? Shouldn't that fear of heaven be so strong? Should be stronger. Should be a lot stronger. Because they saw what happened to that animal. And they realized that animal should have been you. So now someone will say, come on, we don't have sacrifices. I don't relate to it. And the third temple comes, I have to build sacrifices and that. It's in the Torah for a reason. For a very good reason. But even if it doesn't apply, and an Andrew's going to say it doesn't apply to me, all this stuff doesn't apply. Very good. I just gave you one very important lesson. One extremely important lesson, even if it doesn't apply to you. What the purpose is. Now, I could come up with 10 others. I'm not going to do that. So I want to cover a little bit of ground here, right? But I could come up with 10 other reasons that are applicable, that have meaning, without getting into Kabbalah. Right? I use one other example. I don't want to get too far off here. Right? I use one other example, tabernacle. Torah says that God wants to dwell amongst the Jewish people. Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. God says, I want to dwell amongst you. So build me a tabernacle. Very good. So very good. Then you have to give all the dimensions and all the loops and all the clasps and all the boards. But what's the whole purpose of building the tabernacle, which was the harbinger for what? The Beis Hamikdash. And there was a place in the Beis Hamikdash for non-Jews to go, by the way. Even so, I have all these designs and all these maps, and to see how it's all going to fit together. Yeah, they had 7 days practicing, taking it up, putting it down, and all that. You're going to say, come on, that doesn't apply to me. That doesn't apply. What's the point? Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. What's the point? God says, I want to dwell amongst you. Kabbalistically, or even without Kabbalah, let's say, this is going to be hard to understand. If God is everywhere, how can he be in a box? How can you put him in a box? Very hard. You can only explain it really Kabbalistically, right? Because you can't put an omnipresent being in a box. But even so, what's the point? God wants to dwell amongst the Jewish people. And during the first temple, God's presence was seen, was felt all over. Different worlds. Second temple didn't have the same thing. Certain things were missing. God's presence wasn't felt as much. Still a holy time. But they're going to say, come on, that doesn't apply. I'm not going to bring sacrifices. Oh, non-Jews could have. They could bring free will offerings. Yeah, they could bring free will offerings. So that doesn't totally apply. But even without that, what's the point? What's the point? The point is that God wants to dwell in this world. So we got to build something for him to dwell in this world, for him to be amongst the Jewish people. See, we're starting tonight the 9 days. 9 days of mourning, right? More intense mourning, where we don't wash clothes, we don't eat meat or drink wine except on Shabbos. So, culminating with the 9th of Av, which is going to be a Torah fast day, right? Sundown to sundown. It's an intense day. It's an intense day. Why? Well, temples destroyed. A lot of terrible things happened the 9th of Av. I think World War I, World War II started then. Jews thrown out of Spain on that day. A lot of terrible things. A person can say, come on, it doesn't apply. Right? That doesn't apply. Think about it. Why did the temple get destroyed? The temple got destroyed, the Gemara says, because of sinas china, unlawful hatred. Lashon hara, speaking badly against others. Says the Gemara in Tainis, if we don't rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, right? If we don't rebuild the temple, then it's like it's destroyed in our generation also. You're going to say, come on, we're not as great. We're not as great as previous generations. So how can it be? We're held accountable, because we are. We're still held accountable. And you understand, even if it doesn't apply to you, and you're only going to bring free will offerings as a non-Jew, okay. But let's take it one step further. What's the lesson? The lesson is don't mess with God. That's the lesson. You look at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. You look at the curses that have befallen the Jewish people. You look at the end of the book of Leviticus, right? The curses that have befallen the Jewish people. Right? And some of the keynotes, some of these penitential psalms or prayers, whatever, that we read on Tisha B'Av go through a lot of things that the Torah says is going to happen if you don't listen to God. The Jewish people don't listen to God. What's one of them? It's absolutely horrific. They were starving. Women ate their children. This happens. If you go through the curses, many, many curses we see have come to fruition. Come to fruition. So non-Jews say that doesn't apply to me. You're the one who made the mistake. Very good, but what can you learn? What's the lesson? Right? What's the lesson? Keep what God says. Now that does not apply to a non-Jew. Sure does. Certain things they do, liable for death penalty, even if they're not dead yet, unless they repent. You got 7 no-hide laws, right? Really an umbrella about 50 to 60. Isn't there reward and punishment? Yes. Come on, shake your head. Yes. There's reward and punishment. Yeah, but this applies more to Jews. A non-Jew bows down to an idol, I could shoot your head off if I had a gun. I don't have to warn you. That's reward and punishment, isn't it? Or that's punishment. When do they get reward? They'll get reward later. But don't tell me that doesn't apply. That applies. So I would agree. There are things that apply more to Jews than non-Jews, for sure. That's for sure. Don't tell people you don't want to learn about the tabernacle. Don't learn it. But don't tell me there's no message. That's very different. I can give you 100 or 1,000 different messages, which I'm not going to. But it'd be very easy to do. So even if technically going through the verses doesn't apply, okay. And going through the commentaries, okay. Don't tell me there's no message for a non-Jew. Of course it's a message. It's a timeless message. Doesn't just apply to Jews, it applies to non-Jews also in many ways. Even if they're not liable by any of these things. But don't say it doesn't apply. Of course it applies. Because there are messages that the Torah gives. And the message that the Torah gives is don't mess around with God. That's the message. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. And don't think you know better. Because anyone who thinks they know better, I guarantee, and I've seen it, my own eyes, super no eyes, whatever you want to call them, they're going to fall by the wayside. Jews who think they know better are going to reinvent the wheel, they're going to fall by the wayside. They're going to disappear, they'll be a fossil. Because a mule is a very strong animal. It's a hybrid between a donkey and a horse. What's the only problem with the mule? Sterile. So all these groups, sterile, they will disappear. Even if they don't disappear now, even if they have numbers, tremendous numbers now, they will disappear. If you don't have real Torah, you'll disappear. You know, someone told me, yeah, my synagogue, 2,000 families. 2,000 families, not going anywhere. So this person is a guy, he's intermarried, so that means his kids aren't Jewish. I said, how many people in the synagogue are like you? Half? 60%? More? I said, so if half are like you, that means half the people there aren't Jewish. So now, even though they're still alive, it's just a matter of time before you close up shop. Because a mule is a tremendously strong animal, but it's sterile. You won't be able to pass it down. There's no way. All right? I know I have a synagogue, not so far from where I grew up. Also had like 1,000 families more. Something like that. Gone. Synagogue father used to go to, his friend said, you tell your son in Israel. I told him, and Rosh Hashanah, take the gavel, bang it on the lectern and say, repeat after me. It's Skadavi, it's Skadash. Right? So a friend of my father I knew growing up said, you tell your son we'll never go. We're never going to die. Of course you're going to die. What's Coffin's prophecy? Show you my greatness now. Where's my prophecy? The average age is 75. We call that a mourner's minion. The average age is 75. It's only a matter of time. It's going to die. Right? It's pure logic. Right? I don't need prophecy for them. The person kept saying, we're never going to die. We're never going to die. How long did it take? 2 years. 2 years. Coffin's prophecy comes to fruition. It's sad, but that's the reality. Right? You want to reinvent the wheel? You can try. You want to, you want to count women. You want to be transgender. You want to do all these different things. You want to add on, try and preserve it. It ain't going to help. Doesn't work. right? If it would work and you could pass it down majority of the time, we could have a short discussion. Short discussion. But that's all it's going to be because they're going to disappear. So there are many things. So the point is, there are many things, even if they don't apply to non-Jews, there's a message. And there's a message even for non-Jews. Even if they don't convert, doesn't matter. Whether they do or not, there's a message. Now, when I go into, if I was a non-Jew, would I learn these, certain things so in depth? Not necessarily. Because I agree. These aspects don't necessarily apply, but there's plenty what to learn. Plenty of imagery. Yeah, I give another example. There's one other example. Let's take the clothing the Kohen Gadol wore, the high priest. So there's a whole question the commentaries ask, what's the purpose of the clothing? Is the purpose of the clothing because God said to wear it and that's it? And that's an adornment for God? That they serve him in that way? Or is the fact they're wearing it because not only God commanded them, but it uplifts their stature because they're wearing these nice clothes, these different clothes? So commentaries go both ways. Some say, who is it for? It's really for the sake of God. God commanded it, so they have to serve him wearing these clothes, right? Whatever that service is, that's what they got to do. Others say, you're right, it is for God, but it uplifts their status. It uplifts them who they are. Now, normally I would say, I've spoken about this a lot also, normally I would say clothing doesn't matter. Externals don't matter. But if you want to fit into a community, right? If you want to fit in, to a Jewish community, you got, depending on the community, you got to dress a certain way. If a person's, let's say, a, more Orthodox religious Zionist, they'll dress a certain way. They're not going to wear a white shirt every day, right? With dark blue pants, with or without pinstripes, or dark gray, with or without pinstripes, or black, right? Not too hard to go, to go shopping, right? But, other groups will wear different things. They'll wear brighter shirts, maybe. They won't wear black and white, whatever, right? So there's a certain standard by certain, in certain communities. So I would tell you, if you're going to live in a certain community, right, as a Jew, you gotta wear what they wear. You're not going to buck the system, right? If you have a lot of different communities, they're very good. So then you dress like however you dress. But if there's a certain standard, you dress like everyone else. Otherwise, you'll stick out more, right? So again, you could have people that dress the right way, let's say, in my eyes, but they're not so religious. And you could have people that dress differently that are more religious. Okay. So again, I'm not talking about modesty issues here. Just talking about dress. So normally I would say you can't judge a person by the way they dress. Because you don't know. You don't know what's going on. They could be 10 times more religious than you. Could be. Yeah, they just, they dress the way they dress for whatever reason. So dress, I would say, I think it's overrated in different ways. But if you want to fit into a certain community, you got to dress the way the community dresses. That's it. Like that, there's no room for discussion here. You want to fit in, you dress the way they dress. You want to buck the system, you will not do that. You won't do it. You'd be a fool to do it. Why do I say that? Because you're bucking the system. You're not going to change the system. You want to fit in, you'll be like everybody else, okay. But to do it on purpose, not to fit in, that I would say you're playing with fire. You're playing with fire. So again, dress is not the end to end all things. But if you want to fit in a community, it's important. Now, back to what I said before, because I didn't answer the question. Right? We're talking about sacrifices. Right? What's the purpose of God, of the Torah saying, and God saying, that this is a pleasing aroma to me? So a person will say, come on, sacrifice don't apply to me, this, that, they don't really apply today. In general, because you can't bring sacrifice, okay. Right, but we do say if you learn about them, you read about them, it's like you get credit as if you gave them, right? You gave these sacrifices. But even so, what does it mean that God enjoyed the smell? Now, it can't be physical because God doesn't have a nose. At least last time I checked. He doesn't have a nose. It's not physical. It's not in human form. Yeah. So if that's true, we can only describe God in spiritual terms, right? You have to go to the beginning of Chosavavos through the heart, right? Where it speaks about proof that there's only one God, right? And why there's only one God, and the fact that God cannot be human, right? And God doesn't have physical form, right? So then so we can only describe him really in spiritual terms, but that's not even the right way. That's not even a good thing to do necessarily, but we have no other way to describe who God is. So even in that case, what does that mean? What does that mean that God says a pleasing aroma? God doesn't have a nose. He got no nose. So what does it mean? So Rashi there on the spot says, when the Jewish people do what God says, that gives a pleasing aroma. That's the pleasing aroma, not a physical thing. Right? Not a physical thing. So we're talking about something that a person listened to what God says. And that's pleasing to God. They're not reinventing the world. They're doing what God says. Very good. Now, could a non-Jew read that verse? Yes. Would that apply to them? You say, well, it only applies to Jews. But what if a non-Jew? What if a non-Jew keeps the no-hide laws the way they should? Isn't that pleasing to God also? Should be. Right? Is it going to be as pleasing as what Jews do? Probably not. We have different purpose. But it's still pleasing. Now, based on that, it's a very simple explanation. Very, very simple explanation. Now, someone wants to tell me that doesn't apply to non-Jews. Why not? You could read that and get something out of it. You tell me there are other things that are harder. This okay. The Torah is timeless. The Torah speaks to every generation. Anyone who wants to tap in, they're allowed to tap in. They don't want to tap in, okay. God says you're in trouble. You tap in the way you should. But do not tell me these things totally non-applicable. It's not true. Even if you can't do it, even if you tell me these things don't apply to non-Jews, okay. But can't I get a message? Isn't the message important how it applies? And how they could take something out for themselves? Come on, nod your head. Yes, you can take something from it. Are you going to learn all the vast commentaries of what this means, that means? You don't have to. You don't have to, but don't tell me in any way, shape, or form this doesn't apply, that doesn't apply. So don't read it. So don't read it. Who says you have to read the Torah portion of the week? You don't have to. You want to learn those things that are more applicable? Okay. But don't make the mistake and say none of it applies. Majority of it doesn't apply. Right? There are a lot of things for Jews we can't do. So you're going to say, you're a Jew, you got to learn about it anyway. You're right. We have an obligation to learn about it. We have an obligation to know what to do if the Messiah would come tomorrow. We have to bring sacrifice. We have to know what to do. We have to be experts in all these things, and purity and impurity and all these things, right? That doesn't apply to non-Jews. Very good. But the point is, what do I learn from it? What do I gain from it? You want to tell me it all doesn't apply and I shouldn't learn any of it? No. So you want to learn those things that are more, ethical, whatever, that do apply? Okay. But don't say none of it applies. And don't say even things that apply to Jews don't apply to non-Jews. Not true. Technically, it might be true. But the reality is there's certain things that, yeah, you can gain from it without getting into Kabbalah and anything else. You can gain from what the message is, even if that halacha doesn't apply. The Rashi here says, again, verse 12, just read Rashi here. Now, see if we have any questions here. Rashi says, therefore, I said unto the children of Israel, no, so if you shall eat blood, these shall the stranger that sojourns among you eat blood, right? Again, so we started with this question. What do I need this verse for? And I got another verse. In verse 14, I got another verse in the book of Deuteronomy telling me not to eat blood. Spent a long time for not eating blood. Very good. Why keep telling me similar thing? So as we said before, Torah never repeats itself for no reason. The Torah must be coming to teach you something else. So here Rashi says, what does it mean? Kol nefesh mikem. What does it mean? That no soul of you shall eat blood. What does it mean, no soul of you? So this is stated in addition to verse 10. Oh, very good. Right? We're asking good over here. Because what does it say in verse 10? Whatever man there be amongst you, the house of Israel, the stranger sojourn amongst you, you're not allowed to eat blood. And if you eat blood, I'll set my face against you, and I'll spiritually cut you off among the people. So what's this coming to add? Yeah, the obvious question. It says no soul of you shall eat blood. Sound familiar? Same thing in verse 10, right? Neither shall a stranger that sojourns among you shall eat it. Now, it doesn't say you're going to get spiritually cut off, okay? But what's it adding? It's not adding anything, seemingly. Wouldn't we say the exact same thing? He said, I can read the English also. It says the same thing. Very good. Comes along Rashi. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, this is already stated in verse 10. Rashi asked our question, or we asked Rashi's question. Very good. It's always good to see, if you ask one of the commentaries questions, you're on the right, you're on the right track. You're doing good. You're asking their question. Good. This is already stated in addition to verse 10. I already have verse 10. So why do I have this verse? You have to ask the question. It's an obvious question. Yeah, you have to ask the question. What's it doing here? This is stated in addition to verse 10, says Rashi. Why? To admonish the adults about the young children. What does that mean? That they should not permit them blood to eat. Because it says, what does the Torah say? The Torah says, I said unto Bnei Israel, right? Children of Israel, not necessarily children, to everybody, the Jewish people. Now, sometimes it'll say, Bnei Israel, not Benosh Israel. It says to the men, not to the women. It doesn't say that here. It says to all the children of Israel, none of you shall eat blood. Now, what would I think? What would I think? Now, if it were going to be Karaite, to take it literally, you say nobody. Not a male, not a female, not an older person, not a younger person, not a child. Comes on Rashi and says, so what do I have this verse for? It says, Kol nefesh mikem. It says anybody. No soul, sorry, let's say better. No soul of you shall eat blood. What does it say in verse 10? It says, anyone in the house of Israel, any stranger. Here it uses a different language, right? Here it says, no soul shall eat it. So what does it mean, no soul? So Rashi over here says, to admonish the adults about their young children, that they should not allow them to eat blood. But then it tell me before, you're not allowed to eat blood, told me the same thing. No, a little bit different. It said nobody in the house of Israel. Now, aren't kids in the house of Israel? But they're not liable. They're kids. So you tell me, isn't there a mitzvah to educate them? Someone's going to tell me you got a mitzvah to educate your kids, which you do, and then they take on the yoke of heaven, right? And they are going to what? Then they're going to be bar bat mitzvahs. So now it's for real. Everything else is just education, but you got to educate your kids. You have to separate them from eating non-kosher things. I remember one of my kids was, I don't know, under the age of 5, and they had just had meat. So you can't eat milk straight away, right? You got to educate them. They're already at educatable age, right? 5 or 6, let's say. So they don't have to wait 6 hours. They don't have to wait 3 hours, right? To wait, a certain amount of time. So somebody said, how could you do that? That's cruel. What do you mean it's cruel? They want to eat milk. They want to drink milk now. How could you not allow them to drink milk? Because the Torah says you can have milk and meat together. And you got an obligation to educate your kids. You have to separate them from forbidden things. That's the job of a parent. You can't just let them do what they want. Again, depends on the age, depends where they're holding, a lot of things. Yeah. When they're much younger, you can wash out their mouth, give them something to wash out their mouth, and whatever. If they're younger than that, but if they're educational age, you got to educate them. Someone comes along and says, secular Jew obviously comes along and says, that's cruel. How could you be so cruel? It's not cruelty. It's discipline. They have to be disciplined also. Okay, at a much lower level. We're not going to make them wait 6 hours. Right? They're probably yelling, screaming, who knows what. Then, maybe turn you into the police because it's not fair. You're not feeding them. But that's cruel. We don't know that's cruel. You got to educate. I'm allowed to let, person's allowed to let their Jewish kids eat treif. Why? It's forbidden. You got to separate them. When they're older, they make their own decisions. Okay. Still have to chastise them also. Now you have to know how to do it in the right way. But still, what's the Torah coming to tell me? Says Rashi, a very novel thing. Right? So we understand what Rashi's saying. You understand what he's commenting on. Right? Because the Torah says again, no soul shall eat blood. If I already know before that no one's allowed to eat blood, what does it mean? No soul. That means even if they're younger. That's not the same prohibition per se. That's the addition, Rashi says. That Rashi says that the adults have to admonish their younger children. They should not allow them to eat it. Right? It's forbidden. Right? That's what the Medrash says. Forbidden. So it's forbidden even for young kids. But remember one thing, it's pretty crucial. Parents have an obligation, tremendous obligation to educate their kids. Now, it doesn't mean we're always successful, right? There are a lot of things out in the world that can certainly take away, certainly take away from their enjoyment of Judaism, let's say. We got to educate them. Not going to say, oh, it's got to be tough love per se. Wouldn't necessarily go that far. We got to educate them. 100%. You got an obligation to educate them. That's not being cruel. Right? These are rules. These are rules. God-given rules. This is what you got to do. Because when you educate them at a younger age, it's a lot easier for them to keep Torah mitzvahs when they're older. Now, it's not a guarantee. Only 2 guarantees in life are death and taxes, not necessarily in that order. That's a guarantee. We can send our kids to the best schools. They don't come out the way we want. Can happen for a lot of different reasons. That's not really the point. But you got to educate them. There's an obligation to educate them. And if you don't educate them, right, if you don't properly educate them, then you run into problems. Then you're going to run into problems. Not only that, Maravi would say, seen him say it many times, that even if a parent sends their kids to school, and they're in school majority of the time, you got to check up on them. You got to be in contact with the Rebbe. You got to see how they're doing. You got to see who their friends are. Right? So my son's bar mitzvah on Shabbos a few weeks ago, Rabbi of the synagogue said that he heard the name of, or he heard of Gershel Edelstein, blessed memory, one of the heads of Yeshiva in Ponevezh, said he would say 3 things. 3 things to bar mitzvah boys, right? That they're over 13. He said 3 things that you always be careful of. One of them is you got to be careful who your friends are. Right? You got to be very careful who your friends are. Second is you got to be very stringent in honoring your parents, which I poked my son a whole number of times on that one. I was like, see? This is what you got to do, right? That was the second thing. And then what was the third thing he said? Third thing he says, when you come to pray, get there on time. You get there on time, you're there from beginning to end. You don't just rush into prayers. Those are the three things. Those are three things he said. So it's a huge responsibility now. Now it's like a midget with a hat. Someone told me, yeah, you know what's funnier than a midget with a hat? A midget with a hat on a bike, right? But anyway, now it's an adult. Now it's got, now they say he's got a good inclination. Some say he only gets a good inclination later, maybe to the age of 20, right? But he's got a good inclination now. So, you're preparing everything that they learned and they've been taught, in the mitzvahs and the holidays and all these things. Now it's for real. Everything was just practice. Now, parents have an obligation to educate them. There are a lot of issues in education today, but let's say parents have a tremendous obligation. So it's easier when they're younger. I've heard this many times. People want to convert or they become religious. They have older kids. I know somebody that two teenage kids when they became religious, right? They were born Jews and they don't want any part of it. They were respectful. The girls were respectful. I don't know what happened to them, the last 15 years or more, but they were respectful. They weren't a part of it. You can't expect that. It'd be nice. It'd be very nice if they came around. They wanted to, participate and enjoy whatever, but you can't force them. Certainly can't force them. So it's painful to see the way they dress, see the way they act. In other ways, painful, but you can't, there's nothing to do. See, by that time, again, I'm not going to say 100% that this is the case, but by that time, it's too late already. Much too late. Now, it's not the parents' fault per se. It is to a certain extent, but they weren't raised that way. They came to Judaism later. Okay. That does not mean or not a guarantee for anything the kids are going to come. Maybe they will. Okay. Maybe. No guarantee. And again, even educated in the best way you can, sending them to the best schools, also no guarantee. Kids can have learning disabilities, problems in the house, problems with friends, problems with teachers, clashes, different things. There are a lot of different issues. And a person has kids, you pray every day for their spiritual benefit. Every day, every day. For their benefit. Pray they should always go in the right path. It's terrible things going on today. You can have, top boys in yeshivas. They just say, you know what, I'm done. I want to go out and do this or do that. I don't want to, it's not a question of philosophy. That's not the issue. Yeah, they get something out of learning, okay, but obviously not enough. Now they just want to walk away, right? This is a serious problem. So, how could that happen? I'll just, I'll say that they didn't internalize the lessons that they learned. No, you have to learn, you have to this, but they didn't see the beauty for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't see it in the house, they didn't see it in yeshiva, they were put down, I don't know, whatever it is. But I've heard a number of stories, top boy just walking away because they didn't enjoy it. They went through the motions, but they were empty. They're empty inside. Yeah, I see there are a lot of questions. Let me deal with them. Someone asked, they look at analyze the Hebrew Bible's esoteric in an occult document. Nope, certainly not. Did Rashi emphasize that? No, you gotta go as esoteric and occult as pagan. No, something that's esoteric. There are plenty of things, we'll get there. I don't know when, but we're going to get there in Leviticus chapter 19. Leviticus chapter 19, right? A lot of the chapter is about ethics. It's about ethics. So that's, when we see more ethical things, not just pure law, that can be learned in an esoteric way. There are many different ways to learn. Many, many different ways. And many different applications. It can be applications to Jews or non-Jews, right? So to learn it, there are esoteric Gemaras as well, what we call a Agadah, right? Tell different stories to learn different things. Is that pagan? It's not pagan. Why would you think it's pagan? Right? It's definitely not pagan. Right? To learn it and extrapolate it, in an ethical way, it has nothing to do with paganism. They're deep concepts. I heard someone once say, you learn these Agadah, these stories in the Talmud. You can either learn them in 5 minutes or 5 years. Yeah. So usually when I see one of these pieces of Gemara, so I sit on it for a little bit. I'll see some what the commentaries say. I mean, there are deep things coming out of it. Right? There's one commentary, the Ben Ish Chai, blessed memory, more than 100 years ago in Baghdad. He was like the Darshan, the one who gave like sermons in Baghdad. He wrote 60, 70, 80 books. And one of the books he wrote was explanation on these, homiletic Gemaras. Yeah, what I call homiletic Gemaras, these stories. Now, he was giving these classes, to people in the synagogue, before they went to work. You have to imagine what level these people were on. Because when you go through it, it's either 100%, it'll give you a simple explanation. It'll give you, simple explanation what it means. Or Kabbalah. There's nothing in between. Right? It's either that or Kabbalah. Right? So I remember I asked my Rebbe something once. And he said, "You learning Kabbalah?" I was like, no, it's an explicit Ben Ish Chai. But the Ben Ish Chai said it's not, not learning Kabbalah at the moment. So in any case, so there he goes very deep. There are things there he goes very deep. The Maharal also has a major commentary on, on these Gemaras. Right? Now the Maharal is also very deep. Very, very deep. As well. Now, going deeper and understanding, it's not paganism. And there's no reason why it should be paganism. Right? They're explaining it in a very deep way. Now, sometimes it's easier to explain it that way than explain simple explanation, because sometimes simple explanation doesn't butter the biscuit. It's hard to understand. Right? It's very, very hard to understand. I'll give you one example. The Gemara says that potential convert came to Shammai and he said, I want to learn the Torah in 1 foot. So Shammai threw him out. He's like, well, what are you making fun of Torah? You're making fun of Judaism? It's like, get out, scram. I got better things to do with my time. Comes along Hillel. He asked the same thing to Hillel. And Hillel said, don't do anything to anyone else you wouldn't do to yourself. The rest is all commentary. Very interesting statement. What does that mean? If I want to ask, I want to learn Torah on 1 foot. Or you want to learn, I should put, I should put here's my chumash. I should put it on my head. It should go straight through. Like, what does that mean? Going to learn it on 1 foot. Everyone knows Torah takes a long time to learn, right? It's a lot to learn, a lot of things. How are you going to learn it on 1 foot? So give me the simple version. You have to understand, back in the day, people came to ask rabbis questions. Non-Jews, they knew Tanakh. It's not like they didn't know Tanakh. They know better than we do. Certainly today, most people don't learn Tanakh well. Okay. So you can tell me, simple explanation is, they want to learn the Torah in 1 shot. They want the easiest way to learn it. So Shammai threw him out. Right? Probably any of us would have thrown him out. Why? What are you looking for the easy way out? You want to come and be a Jew? You know what it means to be a Jew? You know what you got to learn? You know how ethical you have to be and all these different things. You want to come and learn it? You want the easy way out? You want the Cliff Notes? I'll tell you, I never found them. I was looking for them for a long time. Never found Cliff Notes. On how to absorb all the Torah. So Shammai thought he's making fun of Torah. He threw him out. Totally threw him out. Now Hillel had more patience. So Hillel said, okay, very good. You want to learn it on 1 foot? I'll tell you a fundamental principle. The fundamental principle of Torah is don't do it to anyone. Don't do to anyone that you wouldn't want done to yourself. And the rest is commentary. Now, what's the obvious question? Why do you tell them that? Right? Another version is, people say, you have to love, your fellow men like yourself. Right? The rest is also commentary. But why that? You can easily ask the question, Why did he throw that at him? First of all, why did he deal with him? Shammai threw him out. Why didn't Hillel throw him out? Say, Hillel was much more patient. Shammai just got angry and, he thought he was making fun of Torah. Why didn't Hillel think he was making fun of Torah? Hillel should have also thrown him out. I don't ask such a question. I want to learn the Torah on 1 foot. Yeah, go hop outside. Tell me how long you jump on 1 foot. Good luck. I sit there and waste my time. Right? Hillel can say, waste my time. Try and teach this person. So you can ask the question, why didn't he say like Shammai? You can also ask the question, what did he answer him? So a lot of different explanations. Yeah, but again, you look at it at face value. Some things are easier to understand. Some things are, some things are harder to understand. But going through it and delving into it doesn't mean it's paganism. Not at all. Right? Trying to understand what's going on. And what's the point? What am I supposed to take from it? And that's why a lot of people just sort of read through it, and they move on because, you can sit on it for a long time or, they'll say other more important things. There's also part of the Torah. Ravigdor Miller, of blessed memory, used to say, why is the God, why these homiletic stories, why are they interspersed in the entire Talmud? The Talmud is 39 tractates. Why are they interspersed? Why don't you just put all these stories in one tractate? Why didn't Judah the Prince, Judah the Exilar, whatever you want to call him, Yehuda Nossi? Why did he not do that? Why not organize it in one Gemara? Very good. Organize it in one tractate. So Victor Miller said, you know why? He said it tongue in cheek. He was joking, but why is that? Because if you put it in one tractate, Shiva guys wouldn't learn it. Too esoteric. It's too homiletic. Yeah, you're going to spend a whole tractate? 100 pages, 150 pages, all these different stories. Okay, so you intersperse it. You got to go through it anyway because it's part of what you're learning. But if you put it in one tractate, no one will learn it. He's joking, obviously, but doesn't mean you're a pagan. You delve into it. Doesn't mean that. Someone here mentions also that they think the ultimate sacrifice is the ego identity. You can't have an ego in Torah. There's no ego in Torah. Just the opposite. You have the Levites. What was one of the things that happened to the Levites? They helped teach Torah and helped the Kohanim, in the Beit HaMikdash, right? And in the temple. What was one thing we know that the Levites had to do? They had to shave their heads. They had to shave their heads. Now think about that. Everyone looks like Kojak. If you're old enough, you know what I'm talking about. Everyone's bald, right? These Levites are bald, serving in the temple. Yeah. They even had less hair than me. Very good. No ego. Can't have ego here. Not only that, I'll give another example. What was one of the jobs of the Kohanim? They had to take out the Trumas Hadeshin. They had to take out the ashes. Right? Every day, they take out the trash. Also, what was the point of that? Even though they had a lofty status, and God gave them a lofty status, what was the point? Humility. Oh, you want to think you're God's gift to the world? While you're doing all this stuff, take out the trash. That'll knock you down a little bit. Right? That'll knock down egos. No ego in Torah. Should never be ego in Torah. And if a person has ego in Torah, it's a big mistake. It's a big problem. Now, self-esteem a person has to have. They have to know what their place is. No question. But they also, what's the opposite? What's the opposite of being conceited? Humility. Right? You have to go to the opposite extreme. Real humility. Not telling people how humble you are. Real humility. So the Kohanim were held in check. The Levites were held in check. God chose them to do that. Okay. Yeah, but they had a huge responsibility. Huge responsibility. And if certain things they got wrong for other people wouldn't, it's a sin, but wouldn't say it's a great sin by them, liable for death penalty. Always remember, the closer you are to the king, you get burnt. You could get burnt. Right? So there is no ego. In Torah, there's no ego. Right? There's an obligation to have respect for Torah scholars, legitimate Torah scholars. Right? There's an obligation to stand up for an older person. over the age of 70. Even they don't know much Torah. Right? There are things guarding this. Yeah. So the whole point is to draw close to God. It's a good thing he gave us a book, manufactured himself, gave it to Moses, passed it down to us. But remember one thing out of all of this. Even though there are different ways to serve God, I mentioned this yesterday, right? 70 faces of Torah, different ways to look at Torah. Very good, but you have to be within certain parameters. Once you're outside of certain parameters, then you're out. Right? You know, the example was, well, God didn't ask me to be born. Really? That's a problem. You're born, the mission in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Father says, I'll get there, I don't know, when I'm like 98, right? It says over there, you're born against your will, you die against your will. Right? And in parentheses, Kaufman would say you still have to live. Very good. That's the obligation. But to say I wouldn't ask to be born, no. God put the soul into every body. Right? He knew exactly which soul to put into what body. For what reason? I can't answer. In order for that soul to reach potential, whatever that potential is. So now you want to go back and tell me if God did that himself, and he put the soul in every body, so we don't have a choice who our parents are, siblings are, socioeconomic situation. We're not given that choice. So if we're not given that choice, we got to deal with it, however, whatever it is. Well, someone makes a statement and says, I didn't ask to be born. It's an irrelevant statement. It's a stupid statement. It's a heretical statement. Yeah. Because why are we in this world? Why is the soul in that body? Because obviously the soul has a purpose. What's the purpose? Good. Very good question. Figure out the hardest thing for you to do. You'd rather like slice your eyeballs with glass than rather do it. That's probably what you're doing here. I'm not saying exactly, but you know, it's not going to be an easy thing to fix, so to speak. But God put every soul into a body, you know, in order to, and God is telling you, even if we don't understand it, God is telling you this is the best body for you to be in order to reach your spiritual potential. However that works. So if God is doing that and he puts every single soul into the body and he does it himself because he breathed in the spirit of life, the Torah says, gave us the ability to speak and reason, that's the soul, then obviously there is a purpose. And you can't say, I didn't ask to be born. It's not a question whether you asked to be born or not. Obviously, God knows better than you. He knows better than me. He knows better than everybody. Right? So if that's, you know, so that's heresy. That is absolute heresy. That's outside the parameters of Torah. That's a different issue. Yeah. Someone wants to go, you know, do his bodhidus and, you know, go into the forest and pray and whatever. Is there a problem with that? Really? No. Should they really, you know, pray with 10 men 3 times a day? Yes. Can they go out to nature and commune? Yes. Should they do it on a regular basis? That's a different issue. It's a different issue. Yeah. But if you're within the parameters, you may not agree with it. Okay. Doesn't mean people can't do it. Doesn't mean it's outside of what Judaism is. If it's outside what Judaism is, it makes you a heretic. That's a problem. You know, it's not just, well, I'm going to do what I want. We said before, you're not going to reinvent the wheel. Right? Even we mentioned last night going on the Temple Mount without going into all the details. Point is, since it's a problem to go up there, right? Certainly for a Jew, because we're not sure where to stand, and you're going to get spiritually cut off and go up there. Now, you tell me some rabbis may say they know where to stand or whatever. Even so, that's going to be a provocation against the Arabs. Because it's going to be a provocation against the Arabs, you don't do it. Because that's putting Jewish lives in danger. You're not allowed to put Jewish lives in danger. That'll put Jewish lives in danger. I going to tell me it's permissible. Technically, you know, if, let's say, even this is a minority opinion, but technically, let's say, person knew what they were doing, knew where to stand, this wouldn't be an issue. Let's say you have another issue. The other issue is you're putting Jewish lives in danger, not just in Israel, all over. You're putting people's lives in danger. That you're not allowed to do. That's, you know, again, what would the other side say? We have a right to go up there. And if we have a right to go up there, so I can rub it in their nose and say it belongs to us, they know it belongs to us. Right? But for them, it's a position of religion. If it's a position of religion, then what are they going to do? They're going to fight till the end. Even if it's a lie, that's the whole point. Even if it's a lie, it doesn't matter. It's a worse provocation than other things. Someone said you don't need a provocation. The Arabs don't need a provocation. Start with us. You're right. If I'm on the beach in Tel Aviv or somewhere in Haifa or wherever, they're not necessarily going to start with me. They might, right? But they need a provocation. They need something. They need some reason to do it. You can tell me, well, they don't really need any reason because they feel you're an occupier and whatever, and they're brainwashed. True. But if you do something right in their face and you rub it in their face, yeah, that's going to cause death to people. That is going to cause problems. That you're not allowed to do. Now, doesn't Temple Mount belong to Jewish people? Yes. That where the Holy of Holies is? Yes. Okay, so you have a question, were they allowed to go up there? We hold you're not allowed to go up there. Very good. But even if you were, if it's going to be a provocation, the Arabs can't do it. Right? That would be forbidden. That would be forbidden. But I spoke about that a lot last night. All right, questions here. Someone says, right, I mentioned that. Someone here mentioned non-Jews brought sacrifices. That is true, right? They did. They were not obligatory sacrifices. They were sacrifices that were free will offerings, but they're allowed to bring it. And there were certain places they're allowed to go in the temple. Very good, right? Other places they weren't allowed to go, but they were allowed. They're allowed to bring, right? But again, the question was that sacrifices don't apply. So you could say they brought free will sacrifice, okay, right? So it does apply to a certain extent, right? That's true. But even if it wouldn't, yeah, there's what to learn from it. Every second a person listens to learn story, get a mitzvah, right? Right? Even let's say a non-Jew. Let's say even a non-Jew, right? Even a non-Jew should get married for learning. Why not? But again, they should learn things that apply to them. Please clarify if calf liver is acceptable as is. Calf liver, right? Liver is kosher. Now, how do you kosher it? You got to broil it, right? You got to broil it and make sure to make sure there's no blood, right? The only way to do it, right, is to make sure that you don't have blood. So since there's no blood, it should be okay. Right, but you can't eat it as is. Right? You have to broil it. Right? Why? Because liver is known to be very bloody. Right? So, a person, let's say, bought kosher liver, most likely, I mean, you can ask them, but most likely it's raw. Right? It's not been broiled. Right? So you can't eat it raw. Right? I mean, if you cook it, you're gonna have a problem because you're gonna be eating blood. The only way to eat it to make it kosher, and anybody can do this, is to broil it. Let's say you put an aluminum pan underneath it so the blood doesn't, trafe up your oven per se. But catch all the blood, very good. That's the only way. Right? If you draw all the blood out, very good. Right? Very good. You draw out all the blood, so you should be able to eat it. That wouldn't be a problem. Someone here mentions, I find it here, that some Muslims they've spoken to more angry because of the greater Israel pictures and declarations. Okay. Yeah, that's that's the case. That it's not just going up there, but it's declarations or whatever. But we mentioned, this person thinks he can do what he wants, right? It belongs to us. We can go up there, whatever. But so a person here says that Muslims that they've spoken to more angry about declarations. Could be, yeah. I think a lot of them are just, if you brought up a whole group, let's say, and the whole purpose of bringing them up was to pray there, That's not about a declaration. I mean, maybe that is a declaration, but you want to go up there and pray in the holiest place. Not just at the wall. You want to pray up there. I think they're going to take offense. I don't think they're going to look at the bigger, they're not going to look at the bigger picture. They're not going to be interested in the bigger picture. You're coming on our territory and you want to pray where we're not, we don't want that. That's an affront to us. That has nothing to do with the bigger picture, per se. You're showing them that, it belongs to us and we have a right to be up there, right? So their lie is you don't have a right to be up there, right? Belongs to us. So, it's a constant battle. I think going up to pray is a total affront, right? 100%. It's a total affront, against them. That, not about decorations and and all that, but could be. It could be, someone more upset about, all these declarations. But I think the vast majority, the vast majority don't want people up there because, according to their quote unquote religion, it belongs to them. And you're saying it doesn't belong to them; they have a right to it. They're going to say you don't have a right to it, but that whole thing's a lie, right? That whole thing 100% is a lie. But even with that, right? Even with that, I would say that is that that's problematic, right? But the more trouble about the greater Israel. Okay, right? Someone wants to claim that's their claim that they're more worried about, about greater Israel. But I still think, that it's a provocation either way. Either way. But that could be. Yeah. Any other? Let me see. Any other questions? 1 second here. Yeah, let's go a little bit further. Verse 13. V'ishish mi b'nei Yisrael umin ager agar b'soichum asher yatsud seid chaya oif asher yachel v'shafach es damoy kisal ba'of. So this we're going to be on for a little bit. What does the Torah over here say? The Torah says, whatever man there be of the children of Israel, and a stranger that sojourns among you. Again, we have the stranger here, who hunts and catches any beast or fowl that you can eat. Right? First of all, we're talking about animals or birds that you could eat. He shall even pour out the blood, cover it with dust. So here the Torah says that if you're going to hunt and catch any beast. Now, hunting, we've mentioned a number of times, forbidden for Jews and non-Jews in general, right? Because it's cruel. Now, if you're doing it for food, that's going to be a different issue. So he says if you hunt and you trap animals and you're going to eat them, you got to pour out the blood, right? You can't eat the blood, as we said. And you have to cover it with dust, right? You have to cover it with earth. Right. So now the question here is, it says that if you hunt and catch any beast or fowl. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? What exactly does that mean, hunted beasts and fowl? So Rashi asks, I've seen over here, it's talking about the blood of hunted beasts and fowl and birds, that it's forbidden to hunt them for food. And if you do, and you catch them, and you kill them properly, you have to take out the blood and you have to cover it with earth. So that I know, that I understand. Where do I know, Rashi says, where do I know it applies to geese and birds which have been kept in the house that have already been caught? Oh, what's that? Let's say we're talking about over here, you're chasing after them, you're running after them, whatever it is, outside. What if you trap them inside? If you trap them inside, it's that same thing. So therefore, the Torah says, it says the word saints, It says yatsud seid, double language, right? The word yatsud and seid is the same root, sad, sadi dalid. What does sadi dalid mean? To trap, to hunt. Usually means to trap here, but here he's learning out it means to hunt. So he says, therefore, so how do I know if you trap something in your house? How do I know you have to do this? Right, and spill out the blood and cover it. Because the Torah says, Yatsud said, whoever hunts a hunted thing, right? Gotta translate that, but right, someone who hunts a hunted thing, it means hunted any time, under any circumstances, whether now or before. Right? It doesn't matter whether it happened before or whether you do it now, doesn't really matter. Inside, outside, right? Doesn't matter. But says Rashi, that's true. Why use the term hunting? What's the whole purpose of using the term hunting? In order to teach you that you shouldn't eat meat except after preparation, right? After preparation. Needs a lot of preparation here. Now, it doesn't mean you should never eat meat except after hunting, but Rashi explains the Gemara in Chulin 84a, that one should not accustom himself to eat meat at all meals. Doesn't mean just not eat it straight away. Means don't eat meat all the time. Right? It should be a real luxury, which requires special preparation. Otherwise, if you do it, they'll reduce himself to poverty. Yeah, why? Because meat costs a lot. Right? So it should be a luxury. You should eat it every so often, but not every day. Yeah, so you can tell me also if you eat it every day, it's unhealthy. Right? Also true. But he's saying that, not only bring you to the poorhouse, but it should be something. It should be something where it should be something that is a real luxury, which requires special preparation. Yeah, I shouldn't have it all the time. That's one thing. And then he says that this blood shouldn't eat. Right? You should even pour out the blood and cover it with dust, cover it with earth. I said, why? This is especially mentioned to the exclusion of tame animals, the animals that are not pure. Right? So we're talking about hunting animals. He's only talking over here about kosher animals. Right? He's coming to exclude impure animals, right? Non-kosher, essentially non-kosher animals. So Sisei Chachamim, one of the great commentators on Rashi, asks, we're talking about impure animals, right? Non-kosher animals. What about treifa? What about an animal that's not going to live for 10 years? Sorry, it's not going to live for more than a year. Right? It's got a punctured lung. I don't know, it's got a hole in its head and the brain. Why not mention that? We're not coming to exclude that. Because we already explained, right? We already explained over here that we see that if it's got a hole, right, in the membrane of the brain, or ejected it, he ritually slaughtered it, and he messed it up, made it into a treifa. Right? So again, maybe you tell me it's coming to exclude that. Yeah, but we already know that. We already know you can't eat a treifa. We already know, there are different categories of what makes a treifa. Okay. So he says, but I have a proof over here. What's the proof? Torah says that you have to pour out the blood, you have to cover it. And above in verse 4, it says, blood you should spill. right? You have to spill out the blood. Just like over there, it's talking about if you killed an animal not in the right way, or you made it into a treifa or whatever, right? You still have to cover the blood. Even so too over here. Right, sorry, not that you have to cover the blood, it's you killed the animal not in the right way. It's also over here. Even if you killed an animal, you ritually slaughtered it, everything's good, but you find it's got a hole in the membrane of his brain, or he's got a hole in his heart, or whatever. The animal is not going to live for more than a year, right? So it says, even so, it says you're going to cover the blood, right? It says you're going to cover the blood. Very good. So even though it says you're going to cover the blood, why does it say at the end of the verse, any beast defiled that may be eaten? You're telling me it's coming to exclude what? It's coming to exclude an impure animal, right? Why don't you tell me it's coming to exclude a treifa, right? An animal that's not ritually slaughtered properly, right? If it's not ritually slaughtered, even if it is ritually slaughtered properly, but he found out it's treifa afterwards, so you can't eat it. But the Torah is talking about something you eat, right? It's talking about a bird you eat or an animal you eat. Yeah, so why do I need to say that? Why do I need to say that? So it must be, he says it must be that it's going according to that opinion. It's coming to exclude an impure animal. Because otherwise I got a problem. Otherwise, if you're going to tell me it's referring to a non-kosher, you made it into a treifa, right? Or, it was going to die within a year, even if you killed it properly, right? So you got a problem. Why? If that's the case, you can't eat it, right? For sure you can't eat it. So then why you tell me you spill out the blood and all that? You can't eat it anyway. So what's the point of saying that which you eat? So it can't be going on a treifa, right? Because you can't eat it. You can't eat it. So since Chachamim says, got a problem, right? This needs further clarification. Why? In other words, he asked the question, why you tell me it's treifa? So I got a problem with a treifa and it has to be eaten. So if a treifa cannot be eaten, then why am I going to spill the blood, right? So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it must be talking about an impure animal, right? Tell me it's talking about a treifa animal doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? So the question is, why ask the question? And why ask that question? You could ask the question, but it's kind of a hard question to ask over here. And he says that needs further clarification. That's what the Sisei Chachamim over here says. So comes on Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra asks an interesting question. Ibn Ezra over here says, right, what does the Torah tell me? It says even a ger toshav, someone who lives amongst the Jewish people, right, that doesn't do idolatry and holds by Noahide laws. Why over here doesn't it say by them that they could eat pig, or they could eat horse, or they could eat any birds birds of prey, that are impure? Now we can't eat them. Ger toshav can certainly eat them, and Noahide can certainly eat them. Doesn't affect them. So we mentioned many times, right? It doesn't affect them. As Kli Yakar says, a non-Jew's never going to do something that is no benefit for them, right? So a person will say, yeah, I want to eat clean animals. But again, if it doesn't affect them like it does the Jew, then why would they do it? I want to be more spiritual, this and that. But he says, Kli Yakar says clear, it doesn't apply to them, right? In other words, it doesn't affect them. So it doesn't affect them. Why would they do it? That's what he asks. That's what he asks over there. So why not mention other animals? If you're going to tell me these birds that he could eat, it's as long as he just can't eat the blood, what about other animals? Why is he just telling me by birds and animals? Why don't you tell me by pig? Non-Jews can eat pig, not a problem. They can eat horse meat. I don't know. What's the problem? Yeah, they can eat birds of prey. So then why not mention that they could eat? Ibn Ezra asks. Because it says you're not allowed to eat blood. Since you're not allowed to eat blood, you're not allowed to see blood flow outside of where it's going. Where's the blood go? Where does the blood go? Blood goes on the altar, right? So the only time you'd be allowed to spill this blood and cover it is if you're hunting it and you're killing it for the sake of to eat it, right? But these other things would apply because the whole point of seeing blood being spilled is the fact it's going to go on the altar. These animals don't go on the altar, right? That's why it doesn't mention it, because those animals won't go on the altar. Therefore, God commanded to cover the blood, because if the blood, now, what's the reason? The Torah doesn't tell me, right? Remember, Torah's the law book. Torah tells me what to do, what not to do. Well, Torah doesn't necessarily give me reasons. Sometimes it does, but usually it doesn't. So here the Ibn Ezra says, if you're going to kill an animal for the sake of food, where really should the blood go? Blood should go on the altar. But if the blood's not going to go on the altar, kind of a disgrace, because now you get the living being of the animals in the blood, right? As we mentioned many times, the soul of the animals in the blood, right? Very good. So if that's true, where should really the blood go? Blood should go on the altar. But then you're not going to use the blood on the altar over here. Why not? Because you're eating it. You're going to eat the animal, right? Let's say better. So the blood has to be covered to be disgraced, right? To leave the blood uncovered. Right? So what's the reason that blood really, blood that really is supposed to go on the altar. So a person shouldn't think that whatever what he sees blood over here, the blood of a what do you call it, of a bird or of a ram, right? Let's say, or a calf, whatever it may be. A person may see that, and where's the blood supposed to go? Blood's supposed to go on the altar, but if it doesn't go on the altar, what are they going to think? What are they using it for? Idolatry. Right? So Ibn Ezra says you got to be careful because the way it looks. Right? If you don't cover the blood, maybe people think you're killing these animals for idolatry. So he says, in the book of Deuteronomy, we'll get there, I don't know when. He says, he explains that more in depth over there. So he says, what's the purpose? The purpose is that since it's not being used, the blood itself is not being used for the altar. So therefore, what would I think? What may I think it's being used for? Idolatry. Right? So therefore, we cover it. We cover it for that reason because the way it looks. So says Ibn Ezra. Because the Baal Turim over here brings the Gemara in Chulin. Baal Turim says like this: the blood of a domesticated animal and a bird needs to be covered, right? Which we said, and they don't go on the altar, right? Since they're not going to go on the altar, and these are going to be eaten, so you have to cover it. But gives a different reason though. So, what's the reason? He says, so Midas Adin, God's attribute of justice, won't come and say, right? The attribute of justice won't come and say, hey, they're taking this blood, right? So blood is eating blood. Therefore, you need to cover it. In other words, if we, flesh and blood, right, are eating this animal and the blood comes out, it's like blood's eating blood, so you got to cover it, right? So you got to cover it. Interesting thing. So you could have where sometimes God's attribute of justice will come out, and say something, or make an argument and say, why should we allow them to do this? Look at what they've done. Look at their sins. Look at, whatever. Look at all the things that they've done. They don't deserve this, or whatever the case is. Right? So, is attribute of justice can come along and say over here, why are you allowing this? They shouldn't be allowed to do this at all, because here you got flesh and blood eating blood, or blood's not going on the altar, so why allow them? That's what the Baal Turim says over here. Now the Sforno over here says, what's the problem here? So the Ramban brought down, we spoke about not eating blood. The Ramban brought down the Rambam in the Guide for the Perplexed, and he said, why aren't you allowed to eat blood? Because you'll put the blood on the ground, right? Who's going to come there? Demons. And then people are going to want to find out the future from these demons, and that's forbidden, right? So here the Sforno says, oh, what's the problem with blood over here? Right? Because you're going to put the blood, if you don't cover it, who's going to come? Demons. So therefore, you can't leave blood you can't leave blood uncovered, right? You're going to kill these animals for the sake of food. You're not going to leave the blood uncovered. Therefore, why not? Because that's where demons are going to gather. And there's going to be a big problem, as the Rambam said. That's why you're not allowed to eat blood, so you don't do this. So therefore, there's a command, says it's forno. There's a command to cover the blood with earth, with dirt. So therefore, you won't have demons. Now we said today, demons not so in vogue, right? Their power has been tremendously weakened, even though at the time of the Talmud, there are many stories of demons coming in contact with the rabbis, and they, where they hung out and different things. But the bottom line is by these demons, they're reckless, cause damage. So a person shouldn't have, any contact with them. But today, as we mentioned, back then, we don't have contact with demons. We wouldn't recognize one even if we saw them. But their power, in any case, is much, much weakened, right? So, it doesn't necessarily apply. Wouldn't necessarily apply today. But he's saying back in the day, the reason you did it, you covered the blood is for this reason, as Forno says, right? But we have different reasons why. Could be for that. It could be the fact it's not going on the altar. So, so it's kind of embarrassment where, you got the blood, which is the source of life. So you just leave it on the open. You don't want to do that. So you cover it. There are a number of reasons. But even, we mentioned before, even if, let's say the rabbis tell us a reason why something, may be forbidden or whatever the case is, and the reason now doesn't apply. So even if the reason doesn't apply, does not mean we don't do it, right? Why? Why? Simple reason, simple explanation is because, the rabbis could have given us, 150,000 different reasons. They didn't. They gave us one reason, two reasons, maybe more. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, the guide for the perplexed, tries to find, different reasons for the mitzvahs. Okay, but it doesn't mean it's the reason. Because you could tell me, so difference of opinion, you could tell me if the reason doesn't exist, doesn't apply today. So you can tell me you don't have to do it because the reason doesn't apply. Others would say even if the reason doesn't apply, you still have to do it. Why do you have to do it? Because the rabbis didn't give the reason. Right? They didn't give the reason. Could have been, but doesn't mean it's that reason. Right? It could have been, could have given a lot of reasons, but they didn't. So even if the reason doesn't apply, so those rabbis will hold that even if the reason doesn't apply, you still do it. Because that's not the only reason. That's not the only reason that was given. Because a lot of people would say, wrongly, but they would say, well, this doesn't really apply today, right? We started at the beginning, Some people say, well, Torah doesn't apply to non-Jews. Okay. So a lot of it, may not apply to Jews also in certain ways. It doesn't matter. You still have to keep it. Even if the reasons don't exist. You still have to keep it. Right? And that's how we hold. Right? Essentially, that's how we hold. Because you could have so-called Jews, I'm not going to call them Orthodox by any stretch. Right? They're going to say this doesn't apply. We don't do it. But again, oh, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. So let's throw it out. Right? It has to be something they understand. Yeah. So I told somebody once, I gave sweaters, for my kids, during the winter, said 100% wool. So I said, oh, it has to be checked for shotness. Like, what's that? So I said, you're not allowed to wear, Jews not allowed to wear a mixture of wool and linen. So the person asked me why. I was like, it's a good question. We're not really sure. So a lot of it doesn't really make sense and whatever. It's like, but if you can't give me an answer, why would I do it? So thinking quickly, I said, if I gave you an answer, you probably think, no, I don't like that answer. Or I don't like this answer. Or this answer doesn't resonate. Or, I give you 10 reasons. You can reject them all. Okay. Doesn't mean it's not true. Right? For sure doesn't mean it's not true. But again, even if the reason doesn't exist, that opinion will hold that even if it doesn't exist, doesn't matter. Because it's not the only reason given. Right? So says the Sforno over here. Comes on the Kli Yakar. We'll just start this, I guess. Kli Yakar says, what's the reason for covering up the blood? To make a distinction so you won't come to eat blood. In other words, you kill the animal, very good. Right? You kill the animal, so you're allowed to eat it, but you got to make sure you cover the blood. Right? You drain all the blood. So therefore, why do you cover it? So he said the main reason is so you don't come to eat blood. Right? You won't have that desire to eat blood. Okay. But what about by animals? By bigger animals, you don't need that distinction. Why? Because the bird's already going to be fastidious, and you're going to see when that cow goes up, where's the blood going? On the altar. If the blood is going on the altar, I don't need a distinction, right? I totally don't need a distinction. For other animals, maybe I'm going to eat it. I need a distinction, right? I have to cover it to show I'm not eating it for that reason. I'm not going to eat the blood. Very good. But if the animal already goes on the altar, if the blood's already going to go on the altar, why do I need a specific thing? Why do I need a specific distinction? You already know. Since the blood's going on the altar, you're not going to come to eat blood. Because the blood that goes on the altar is an atonement, right? Because the Torah says before, Torah says that I placed upon the altar blood. Why did I place blood on the altar? Very simple reason, to atone. Blood is there for atonement, right? It's very interesting, right? Just as a side point, not that it matters, but JC came and died for our sins. Very good. So you would have thought, if he died for his sin, for our sins, well, blood should go on the altar, right? Let's say. But he's not even compared to a sin offering. What is he compared to? All right, it's kind of silly. If you think about it, he's compared to a Paschal offering. Well, what's the problem? Paschal offering, according to everybody, according to all rabbinic authority, the Paschal offering is not an offering for sin. It was never an offering for sin. Read the verses, very clear. Why they compare him to a Paschal offering, take it totally out of context is what they do. Right? That's what Christians do. But the blood over here is for atonement. Okay. But the blood goes on the altar. That's the point. If it goes on the altar, one of these animals, then you don't need a distinction. Then I already know. Then I'm already aware. Very good. But he says that's not really the main reason. Right? That's not really the main reason to forbid blood. Why? Because if you're going to tell me that, then what about the blood of a bird or a domesticated animal, smaller animal? Not going on the altar, per se. So if they're not going on the altar, then what's the point? So why using that explanation? So he says, what's the main reason that a person should not eat the soul of the flesh? That we said, right? That 100%, right? We've said, and we've said it many times, right? You're not allowed to eat the blood for exactly that reason. For exactly that reason. Because the blood is the soul is in the flesh. And then he says that the miracle is that the soul is in the body, right? It's in the blood, so to speak. And that's going to go on the altar, and that's going to atone. Right? And that for sure is going to atone. So what do I learn? What do I learn over here? He says you can understand the reason that blood is forbidden because of the soul, right? That's the main reason. Across the board for all animals. Don't tell me it's about going on the altar and it's atonement and this and that. Tell me the soul's in the flesh. That's what the verse said before, and we're going to say later. Even so, I have to cover it. I have to cover the blood right? In order to make a distinction, so a person won't come to eat it. Okay. So even though we know the soul's in the flesh, right? The soul's in the blood, very good. Right? You want to make a distinction so you don't come to eat blood. But what about the blood of an animal, a bigger animal? That I don't need. Why? Because it's enough that it's going to go on the altar, right? And that's a sign that blood is in the soul, right? That's that's the reason. Even though you tell me blood is in the soul, very good. But the fact is, it's going on the altar, and that'll be enough of a hecker. That'll be enough of a distinction. Then he gives another reason. He says, not good that a person eats, like a slave eats from the table of his master, right? But blood of a bird or a smaller animal, there's no distinction whatsoever. Therefore, God said, cover the blood. I want you to cover it to make a distinction so you don't come to eat blood. Even though they have other birds that went on the altar, right? You had doves, right, that went on the altar, and other birds that went on the altar. You could say, but they also went on the altar. Yeah, nonetheless, since they were few, yeah, in other words, they weren't the majority, right? Majority of things that went on the altar were not birds, right? So therefore, we wouldn't use that as an explanation. So that's another reason, right? That's another reason. You tell me you're gonna make a distinction, right? But a lot of birds didn't go on the altar. Most things that went on the altar were animals. Yeah. Question. Someone asks. 1 second. Someone asks. So we answered about calf's liver. Why is koshering necessary? Right. So if you kill the animal, you're right. Really doesn't need to be kosher because you kill the animal properly. But the problem is it's full of blood. That's the answer. The fact is that the liver is full of blood, so you can't eat blood, right? So even though you killed the animal, very good, you killed it in the right way, but still the liver is full of blood. So how can you eat it? You can only eat it by roasting it. Now, someone asks as well, why must you honor your neighbor? Just punch me in the face. Why do you have to love him as myself? So very good. What do we say? What did Hillel say? Hillel said that don't do to anyone that you wouldn't want done to yourself. Now that's true. Why should we do something to someone else that we wouldn't want done to ourselves? Okay. So you can say people make mistakes, people get stuck, whatever. Right? Very good. Now, honoring someone who just punched you in the face. Yeah. It comes to parents to be a lot more difficult here. But let's say a parent was evil, right? We'll make it easy. Let's say a parent has status of being evil. Yeah, there's an opinion between the Rambam and the Torah whether you still have to honor them. So honoring them, we would probably say you don't have to. Right? In other words, if they would walk in a room, if they were still alive, and they walked in a room, you wouldn't have to stand up for them. Right? But you can't disrespect them. You're allowed to defend yourself. They come and attack you, but you can't disrespect them. You can't embarrass them in public, even if you wanted to, even if they deserved it. Right? You can't talk. You shouldn't talk back to them. There's certain things. By parents, very hard. Right? Very, very hard. They can cause all kinds of problems, psychological abuse, other things. That's true. That is very true. So honoring them, who said you have to honor them? It's a difference of opinion. Right? Now, respect is going to be a hard thing. That's going to be a hard thing because you're going to say, look what they did over here. Well, they deserve respect. Right? Respect is one thing. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't abuse them, even if they deserve it. You can't make fun of them. If they say something that's blasphemous, let's say, can't put them in their place straight away. Right? Even though I think the Torah said, I can't believe the Torah would blah, 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 blah. Or I don't believe in this. So, well, you don't say, well, you're wrong. Right? That's being disrespectful, even if they are. You have to say, well, I think the Torah says like this. When a person says that, then they understand they said something wrong, but you're not telling them directly. Now, if they would blaspheme and this and that, so it's a different issue. Still can't put them down. Still to show some level, of respect. Now, loving your neighbor as yourself. If the neighbor does something wrong, you don't have to, you don't have to turn the cheek and say, okay, hit me again. Go ahead, do that again. No, that's no obligation. It might be a Christian thing, right? But certainly by a Jew, we don't hold that, right? Now, hating a person in his heart, hating a Jew in his heart, yeah, that you're not allowed to. You can hate what they do. You certainly can hate what they do, but certainly not, certainly not hate the person. Now, technically, I would say a Jew can hate a non-Jew. They could hate them. Now, aren't they created in God's image? Sure. Is it a good thing to hate people? No, in general. In general, but King David says, someone will say, doesn't King David say, I hate those, I love those that love you, I fight against those that hate you. Doesn't say I hate those that hate you. He says, I'll fight against those that hate you. Very big difference. So even them, they're going to say, hit me, I should love? No. Absolutely not. For evil people, a different issue. Very, very different issue. I was just learning today, speaking Lashon Hara. Yeah? Can you allow to speak Lashon Hara against a secular Jew? And the answer is yes. Why? Because if they lose their status of a Jew, they do things that take away their status from being a Jew. They desecrate Shabbos in public. Technically, they get the status of as a non-Jew. I can say whatever I want against them, unless they repent. Now, you ask me, is it a good thing to do? On a regular basis, right? Chofetz Chaim says, I can make fun of him. I can do whatever I want, essentially. I can do whatever I want. So you can say, okay, make fun of him as much as I want. Now, the question is, in the long run, is that good? You'll say, it makes me feel better. For what these people are doing, look how stupid they are, and this and that. True. That's very true. So, I'm not going to disagree with the Chofetz Chaim over here. I'm certainly not in the level 2. No question. But he would say 100%. You can make fun of them as much as you want. As much as you want. That's when they have the status of being evil, and they don't, even if they're Tinoch Shanishba. Even if they grew up as a potato farmer in Idaho. No offense, anyone's a potato farmer grew up in Idaho. Right? They didn't know nothing from nothing, but they desecrate Shabbos. Yeah? Some would say, since under onus, they don't know what they're doing. So yeah, you shouldn't say whatever you want whenever you want against them. Per se. But technically you could. They're not doing what Jews should do. Right, in general. So you're going to ask me now, the answer is, you're going to ask me, wait a minute, someone punched me in the face. I have to love them as myself? No. Nobody would say that. Nobody would say that. And if they cause you damage, I'll tell you something you got to work on. We all have to work on. If someone caused us damage, even if we did it to ourselves, doesn't matter. Person caused you damage. You're going to love them as yourself? Where's your emunah? The fact is, God sent this person as a messenger. You're yelling at the stick. You're getting upset at the stick. You got to love this person. So just reading Victor Miller, bless him memory, mentioned, last week's parsha about Parshas Matos, about how you have to be careful what to say, what to speak. So he said, you walk around saying how much you love people, how much you love Jews, how much you love people that learn Torah. Say it. He said all the time, you should say it. It'll bring out love for such a person. How are you going to say that? Someone just punched you in the nose. Someone caused you damage. I love that person. God, I want to thank you for putting that person in my path. What's the person going to say? What are you, a masochist? That's what you're asking for? The lack of emunah. Essentially, it's a lack of emunah because, even if this is what your soul has to go through, and God put this person in your path, and that person's going to be guilty for causing you damage. Very good. Isn't the person causing your damage a stick? The person causing damage, I'll tell you, is the stick. 100% is the stick. So what are you getting upset about? Essentially, it's a lack of emunah. No, you're going to say, but the person caused me damage. You're right. Is God going to take care of them? You don't have to worry about it. God will take care of them. Never pray God should take care of them. Because then your file is going to get open. You do not want that except on Rosh Hashanah. Right? So you can pray in general. Anyone, out there that may cause me damage, God stop them. Save me from being caused damage or whatever. That you can pray for, not having anyone necessarily specifically in mind. Right? But this person also created Sel Elokim. He's creating God's image. Very good. There are people creating God's image do terrible things. You're right. You're right. So again, those that go against God, I don't have to love them. Right? Those that love God, I love. Those that hate God, I fight against. Doesn't say I love them. Doesn't say I hate them. Right? But I would say, you got to see where it comes from. So you say the person's anti-Semite, this, that, okay. You don't have to work on loving such a person. But you have to remember, God put this person in your path for a reason. He's knocking you around for things that you deserve, and God's just using that person. Right? So you shouldn't be upset at that person. Say, God, what did I do to deserve this? Someone here mentions, again, it's not easy. I'm not by any stretch saying this is easy. Right? But, this is what we have to do. This is the level we have to reach. We have to try and reach. And, it's and there are people out there, they don't do it on purpose. Someone causes someone damage. They didn't do it on purpose. They didn't have intention. They caused damage. Right? Remember one thing, a person stole from somebody, you return the money, very good. Right? But you got to appease them and ask for an apology. That's part of repentance. But you return the money, not good enough. That's part of it. But you didn't do the whole thing. Right? So I would say, we get in all kinds of situations. Some are easy to deal with, some not to deal with, whatever it may be. So a person should think to themselves, God, you put me in this position, or I did it myself, doesn't matter. I'm going to pass this trial 100%. I don't know, Pesach Kron say this should be well. Yeah, I'm going to pass this 100%. Now, tests are not so easy. They're not meant to be easy. But we have to change, and the whole purpose of what we learn over here, whatever we're learning, is to change who we are and to think the way the Torah wants me to think. That's not an easy thing to do. I make it look very easy. It's not an easy thing to do. I always tell my wife, I listen after things, I'd say I look different. Right? You got to put it into practice. Not easy. 100% not easy. I remember everyone said, you started by me, your heart was hard as a rock. So I said, and now he says a little bit better. I said, a little bit? It's like, come on, give me a hug. I said, a little bit. Oh, my life, no question. But says Rav Solanter, to change one character trait is hard. One is hard. Doesn't mean we don't have to try. Right? The Torah expects big things. Right? And when the Chosel speaks about this in Shar B'Tachon, right, in the gate of faith and belief in God, he doesn't say this is just for the righteous. He mentions this many times throughout his book, Duty to the Heart. Right? It's not for the righteous only. It's for everybody. Everybody's going to say, me? 2,000 years later, after Mount Sinai, 3,500 years later, come on, God really expects this? God says, Leviticus chapter 19, we're going to spend a long time on Leviticus chapter 19. It says, don't take revenge. He says, I don't understand. I wanted to borrow his lawnmower. He said, no, right? So I'm not giving it to you if he didn't have a good reason. Now this person comes to me. I have a brand new lawnmower. He says, can I borrow your lawnmower? You say, no. He says, you didn't give it to me. I'm not going to give it to you. Torah prohibition. Now, your house is like a jungle. Who knows what you had there, right? So you use the lawnmower to clean it very good. And this schnook, we'll call him, didn't want to lend it to you for whatever reason. I'll tell you how far it goes. I remember back in the day, when I was here, and I called my parents, they called me back, so I was on the phone, and this guy says, you've been on the phone too long, and he hung up the phone. So I need the phone. Well, what do you need the phone for? I was standing right in front of a pizza place. He calls up the owner. It's like, listen, we're hungry. My family's hungry. You should open the store. Pizza. Yeah. That was more important than me talking to my parents. Okay. Before cell phone. Yeah, well before cell phone. So what happened? Or what could have happened? So I went back to learn. So if he would have come in and asked to borrow a pen, and I had a pen to give him, I could look at him and say, really? I should give you my pen. You just hung up the phone on me. I should give you my pen? Get out of here. Go borrow someone else's pen. That would be a Torah prohibition. Torah prohibition. Now, someone could argue, didn't that person deserve it? Look what he did. Makesher. What's the connection here? Just because he did that, what would everybody say? Or, sorry, let's say better. What would some people say? You got to be the bigger person. You be the bigger person. Not always easy being the bigger person. You don't want to, eat crow and all that. This person just did something nasty. He thought he was right. Okay. I didn't think he was right. I still don't think he was right. No matter. We're going there for hours. Yeah, no matter. Point is, if he would have asked to borrow a pen and I had a pen to give him and it worked, I'd have to give it to him. No questions asked. No questions asked. No feeling of, why am I doing this, and that? Because you lose the mitzvah otherwise. Now, someone's going to ask me the $2 million question. And the $2 million question is that really what God expects? Is that really what the Torah expects? Yes. You got to work on yourself. You got to see God put this person in your path for a reason. Why? Who knows why? Right? God puts people together for different reasons. For that, sometimes we figure things out, sometimes we don't. Doesn't really matter. But sometimes we'll scratch our heads and like, well, I have to speak to this person or whatever. Don't know. Right? We don't know. But what's the idea? The idea is that we're not talking about the righteous here. When it says don't take revenge, that's the example. Right? Or don't bear a grudge for someone did something years ago. Move on. Sometimes it's hard to move on. Sometimes you need therapy, other things. Okay. Right? But don't bear a grudge. It's not healthy in general. Any psychologist tell you that. Not healthy. Remember, everybody says you live in the past, you have no future. Some things are hard to get rid of. Okay. Right? Not necessarily talking about that, but we bear grudges for stupid things. Sometimes for stupid things. But that's what the Torah expects. Torah says you're not allowed to do it. It says, yeah, but it's really hard. Torah says, I'm not talking about the righteous, I'm talking about everybody at their level. If it's forbidden, forbid it. So you got to work on it. Yeah, somebody asks, all right, 1 second. So even if there's difficulty in life, right? There are times, tell someone watching, which they won't let you, but let's say, a surgeon does surgery. Person's going to be in pain, right? But what's the whole purpose of being in pain? To heal the person. So they're going to say, oh, you're killing them, you're causing them so much pain. They said, yeah, there's going to be pain involved, but it's going to save their lives. If it's going to save their lives, everyone's going to sign up, right? It's going to save their life. Okay. Yeah. But it's going to make you better, right? And sometimes we have to go through pain and different things, to elevate our souls in different ways. Yeah. It makes you a stronger person. A lot of people gone through hard trials, made them better, made them stronger. Yeah, other people destroyed them. Okay, right? But, it's how we take it, how we deal with it. I could have thrown in the towel a long time ago. Yeah. It's not like, what do I need this for? A lot of, a number of things. But we don't live in a disposable world, even though it's the way it looks, right? But in general, you got, sometimes things are really hard to deal with. Okay. Sometimes you're going to say, like, what's it all worth? I'm trying this, I'm trying that. I'm still being thrown around like a rag doll, I've heard a lot of people say. Okay, so keep doing what you're doing. It's not going to be that way forever. Right? Even evil doesn't go rampant forever, the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem and other places. Right? God created evil, doesn't mean God is evil. Right? Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7. Right? Created evil. So he allows people to tap in. Okay, he doesn't want them to, but if they tap in, okay. And if they do evil things and this and that, at some point it's going to get stopped. Some point. Can't go on forever. Right? Does evil have a benefit? Depends what it is. Right? Could have a benefit. But if you have to go through it because there's no benefit, I'm not going to say, what happened to this person who stole my money, what a benefit, I had shoved in my face for 18 years. on a weekly basis. I'm not going to say what or whatever, but I'm going to put my trash out there. But, even so, it was a hard test. It was an extremely hard test. If you tell me, person went to jail, stayed in jail, other things happen, I wouldn't have to hear about it. Good. I got to hear about it every week. It's kind of hard, right? It's kind of hard. But you know what? Going through that made me who I am today. No question. Now, would I rather have gotten the message without going through it? Sure. God has his ways. Right? But you're not the same person because of it. Now, someone will ask me the $2.5 million question because I just upped the ante. And that is, so every single day you're whistling Dixie and smiling? No, definitely not. At good days, at worse days, whatever. I'd always say when I'm at the top and everything's going good, yeah, then it doesn't really bother me so much. But you're on your knees and you struggle and this and that's harder, much harder. Especially if this person living the life of Riley is no longer in this world, so I'm probably suffering to no end, but it's probably not the worst thing the person ever did. But even so, he was a conduit. And thank God he didn't come to me ask for forgiveness. Would have been very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. Yeah. But if I would have known the Chos Levavos, I would have had to swallow that pill. Imagine, that would have brought Mashiach. Could have brought Mashiach. Yeah, if that would have happened. But it's a very hard thing to do. Very, very hard thing to do. You got to say, can God expect that? We've seen what people can do. There's a story where Chaim Shmulevitz tells a story. He's the former head of the yeshiva, the Mir yeshiva. In Jerusalem, they're getting bombed, right? Jerusalem's getting bombed left and right. They were in a bomb shelter. And this woman screams out that she was left in a guna, that her husband refused to give her a bill of divorce, suffering tremendously. So she screamed out to heaven and said, God, I forgive him. I forgive him for all the agony he put me and my kids through. Chaim Shmulevitz, when he heard that, without going into all that, but Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said, when he heard that, I knew, we're going to be safe, no problem. That is going to be divine protection right there. That's like you'd say after being dragged through the mud, having all kinds of difficulty. He didn't go into detail, but maybe this guy never paid any money. They were starving, different things. And she says, I'm willing to forgive him with a full heart. Just save us over here. Chaim Shmulevitz said that was the merit they were saved. He says, no question. Someone does that, shows unbelievable self-sacrifice. Now, how do you know that? Maybe it was other reasons. Maybe. But when you hear something like that, person been dragged through the mud and they're starving and going through all kinds of things, and his husband's a schnook, as I would say. Could think of better words, but okay. We'll keep this clean. So this person does that and causes all that damage. He says that's the reason. Someone here says difficulty drawing the line between orthopraxy and orthodoxy. Yeah. So I'll tell you like this. I'll tell you very simple. Somebody who wants to keep what the Torah says doesn't mean they're perfect. Now, if they make a mockery out of it, that's worse. That for sure is worse. So a person will say there are a lot of fakers out there. They dress the dress, they talk the talk, they walk the walk. Very good. But they're not so religious. Okay. And there are people who don't do that, but they're more religious. Okay. But in any case, the Torah says I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to do the other thing. Does that mean we're perfect? No. We have an evil inclination like everybody else does. Right? Everyone's got an evil inclination. Doesn't mean we're perfect. Right? On the other hand, you got to do the best of your ability to uphold what the Torah says. Now, I'll tell you how far it goes. You have somebody, I know somebody that said, it's a secular Jew says this person guilty of fraud or whatever, and they're supposed to keep Torah mitzvahs as an Orthodox Jew. Well, I don't really keep that much. I don't do that, so I don't have to keep anything. There's no logic in that. God's not going to ask you, about this person who did X, Y, and Z. God's going to take care of them. You don't have to worry. God's going to say, you have your own obligation here. The repercussions for what you do. You have to answer for what you do, not what the other person did, not for what this other schnook did. He's going to have to answer, or she's going to have to answer. Okay. You have to answer for yourself. You can't make that conclusion, say, oh, this person did this, that person did that. I didn't do that, so I'm better than them, so I don't have to do anything. There's no logic in that. except to say pass the buck. I don't have to do anything. Ha ha. That person did that. I don't do that, so I'm good. So you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos, you're allowed to eat treif, you're allowed to speak Lashon Hara. Right? The famous statement, do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't apply to Torah at all. Because the Torah says, do as I say, you have to do what he says. There's an obligation to the best of your ability. Now, again, doesn't mean we're perfect. But you have to strive. You have to work hard. Right? It's very easy to see contradictions. A lot of people, I don't know what the stats are, but there are people who see that rabbis and others, they see contradictions. They say, wow, they're supposed to be leading people and this and that. How could they be contradictory? Right? And they say so. If they're not going to do it, why should I have to do it? It's a bad conclusion. Right? A person in the power of influence, they do the wrong thing. It's worse, 10 times worse. Someone doesn't know anything. They grew up as a potato farmer in Idaho again. No offense, anyone's a potato farmer or grew up in Idaho. They do something wrong. They're liable. Right? They may look bad, but it's not the same as someone who knows what they're doing, really knows what they're doing. But again, don't mix up Jews and Judaism. Just because somebody looks like an Orthodox Jew does not mean they are. In many ways, you have to live it. So people understand people can make mistakes and do other things. True. People are human. They have an evil inclination. Okay. If people are using the Torah in a way that they shouldn't, that's a different issue. Again, it's also part of evil inclination. It's also about having power in different things, for all kinds of things. Where, people abuse the system. And they're an authority of power. They have a certain level of authority, or power. That's wrong. That's for sure wrong. I got to tell me people do it. Okay, it's not the majority by any stretch. I hope not. Right? But can people get carried away? Yes. Does it make it right? No. To say how Orthodox are they? I'm not here to judge, but if they're doing things like that, they can't be really that so religious, or their inclination just overcame them. That can happen. That for sure can happen. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Sunday, 9:00 Eastern Time, 4:00 Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos on the Torah portion of the week, which I haven't done in a while. Q&As, Ethics of Our Fathers, book of Leviticus. Want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com, which I'm having a good beginning of the day, middle of the day, and